Hello, 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 everybody. I am Stephanie D. Sanders, and you are watching Podcast, a show that interviews the interviewers. That's right. I am interviewing the podcasters. Decided to do this show because I want to know what the podcasters are talking about. We see them, we see some of them, we don't see a lot of them, but I wanted to find out more about their shows and what they're talking about. And these things could potentially help you or somebody else. So that's what we'll be doing today on this show. I have a good friend of mine. He is coming through to tell us about his podcast, Reflective Resonance. Welcome to the show, my buddy, my partner in crime, Daryl Clark.
Hello, Miss Stephanie. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, I was giving him an introduction almost like you would a DJ because he was a DJ. So I was feeling that kind of vibe coming from him. So I wanted to do that for him this day. Daryl, what inspired you to start the podcast Reflective Resonance?
The Reflective Resonance podcast is really all about allowing people to share their personal stories, triumphs, pitfalls, whatever the case may be, through my platform. So oftentimes, you know, certain people have great stories to tell, but don't necessarily have an avenue for it to truly flow through.
Right.
So that's really what what brought up the reflective resonance, because I really want it to be a reflection on the community in which we all live in every day. And so a lot of my guests are, typically directly from community. And again, it's all about them sharing their art, their talents, with the world through my platform.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about who is Daryl and how did you actually come to this place of doing podcasting?
So the thought of podcasting actually came out from, as you mentioned, I at one time was a mobile DJ, and I would always get told that, you have a DJ voice, you have a broadcast voice, you have this wonderful voice. And so I said, okay, how can I utilize this voice of mine to share with the world, so to
Mhm.
speak. So that's where the thought of having a podcast, came into play. But the world may not know that I've always been into music, audio, dabbled a little bit into video and that type of thing. So, to me, why not? When you think about podcasting, it's definitely an independent way to share your talents with the world for little to even sometimes no cost. So,
Right. And I totally understand that whole voice thing because I was doing radio for a while and people would trip out completely when they see you or hear you doing radio and then they see you in person. It's like, wow, they couldn't put the two together until I started videotaping
yeah.
myself actually doing it. So, and we know each other, so we know we have different kinds of voices. I know I have multiple ones that kind of they go from here to there. And
Right.
it's really a wonderful way to be able to express the gifts that you have with your voice, with connecting with people. And so that's why I wanted to really talk to people and see why did you decide to do this? And I was thinking just now, what do you hope that the people actually gain from your particular podcast?
So, really and truly, again, it's all about, the listener learning the stories of my guests, because I'm pretty sure if there's an issue or a triumph or whatever the situation is, that my guest is not the only person with that same issue.
Right.
Um, so it's all about having someone tell their story with the hopes of it actually laying on the hearts and minds of others, so that um, someone else may not, or someone else can realize that they're not alone in whatever it is that they're going through.
Yes, yes, because this is the biggest type of platforms that we can actually get those messages out, from our own personal ones to, like you said, the people that you have on for your show, which is great because our stories and our testimonies, so to speak, can be tremendously helpful for other people to kind of let them know, you're not alone in certain things, or I support you, because you're doing the same type of thing or along those lines. So it's really inspiring to hear that that's the type of show that you have, for people to be able to connect with one another. And I love it. I love it. I love that thought. But now here's a question for you. What would be one of the most interesting or memorable shows or persons that have been on your show thus far?
So, probably the most memorable was actually my very first one. And so, in my first episode, I am talking with an author who essentially talked about or went back and researched her lineage, of her family history. And she grew up in the low country or she lives currently in the low country of South Carolina.
Mm.
And if you know anything about South Carolina, that's where a lot of the slaves that were brought over from Africa landed in this area. And so when you think about South Carolina, it's definitely the deep South. And Miss Davis Brannick again, so she is like the historian of her family. When I say historian, like she went
Mm.
way
Way
down,
back.
way back into even the slave, I would call it annals, but basically the records,
Mhm.
and basically traced who um, essentially traced her family history, her family tree, all the way back into the early 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. But
Wow.
and that's a great story in itself. But how she did it was through accessing the South Carolina archives. And so where she lives, in Columbia, South Carolina, or very near Columbia, South Carolina, there is it's a state archive building, and and it's a public, basically a library, but inside of that library is just a wealth of knowledge just about that particular area. So in her free time, she went back and literally just sat down and essentially retraced her family history and the areas in which they lived. And then what was even so exciting is that she actually went and found like the graves of where some of her
Oh my.
ancestors were. And so if you think about slave graves, they didn't necessarily have markings in the way that we
Right.
to be
Right.
today.
Hmm.
So even that was a feat in itself. And actually, we are definitely going to be doing a part two to that podcast, um, where we actually go back and I actually walked with her through some of the lands in which where a lot of her family lived. So and then the other cool thing was that we actually recorded that episode right there inside of the South Carolina archives. And so we're literally filming the podcast in the library where a lot of the history and research actually took place. So that was pretty exciting. And I definitely said that that's probably up to now one of the memorable episodes. And again, that's episode one.
Wow. Wow. That is awesome. I would love to see even more of that, just to be able to go with you guys and literally see where it is. Because, sometimes back in the days, even in some of the cemeteries and so forth, they've been finding things even more recently in years shortly past, but how people have been building buildings and things like that on top of grave sites, so where people didn't even know that their family members were there or covered up and
Mhm.
all that type of thing. Now, I don't know if she would have something like that, but I found that to be real interesting when they find grave sites like that. So just for her to be able to find anybody without
Yeah,
any type of names and things like that attached to them, that's
right.
going to be just a wonderful feat in itself, and probably really rewarding for her too to
Very.
have that information.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, that's good. That sounds like it could be a, you know what? See, this is what happens when I start talking to people and I start talking about things like this. My mind immediately starts brainstorming and whatnot. And so just go ahead and tell her to create a document. Go ahead. Because that's
Yeah.
the next thing that was
That's the
popping
next
up in
thing.
my
Yeah.
mind. Yes.
Precisely.
Yes,
Precisely. Yeah.
that's awesome. That's amazing. So how do you actually go about selecting the guests to be on your show? Are you looking for any particular types and things like that?
Yeah, definitely just what I would just consider quote unquote interesting stories that again don't get told on everyday media, everyday social media. So it's almost like finding like that diamond in the rough, so to speak.
Mm,
Um,
yes.
you know, though it's those types of stories that to me will draw in a listener. Um, so that it takes them out of the realm of the everyday things that they hear about and watch every day or listen to every day, and actually hear an actual feel good story.
Mhm.
So I've done, and most of the actually all of the episodes up to this point have been authors. However, I do want to kind of branch out and also do music artists, actual uh, your true artists. So anything where somebody is utilizing their talents to basically tell their story. So
Yes.
it can be an athlete, it can be an author, it can be an artist, a musical artist, or whatever the case may be, because they're using their talents to basically share with the world what they know and what they love. And oftentimes, to be honest with you, Stephanie, the people that are out here doing this work, it's not a get rich type of deal. They're doing this
No, it's not.
out of the love
Yes.
of the work that they do. So it's
Yes.
very similar to podcasting. We're doing this out of the love of, or out of the joy of, you know, um, getting our word out to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think that you have evolved since the first podcast that you did?
Well, a lot of it, since I do a lot of the editing and a lot of the post-production, actually the pre-production as well, um, I've learned a lot just in that space alone. But I've also learned about camera presence, voice inflection. I've learned so much about um, audio effects and putting videos together and those types of things. And so for me, personally, because I shared with you earlier my love for audio, all things audio visual. It's allowed me to kind of dive into areas in which I really wasn't familiar with.
Yes.
Um, but also too, it also allows me to connect with people in ways in which I normally would not have connected with them. So with the type of work that I do, I'm in the community all the time, but that's wearing a my career hat, right? And so it's very rare that you can do anything personal when you're wearing your career hat. But when you put on your own hat, so to speak, with
Yes.
your own logo
Hmm.
and you're representing, yourself, you kind of can move and shake in different ways.
Hmm.
And so um, that's how I can definitely say that I have certainly have evolved in that way.
All right. Because I mean, you are so right. It takes a whole lot of time, a whole lot of effort. A lot of times we end up doing a lot of the work ourselves, but I think in doing that, it will really help us to grow as
Yes.
people and artists and creators and really producers because we're producing our own
Correct.
projects, to know what we want, to know how to either get it or tell somebody to get it. So it's a learning process. We just talked about that just right before the show.
Yes,
And I was
yes.
saying how I want to learn how to do CapCut and just master that thing or whatever. And then I hear you saying how you've done some of that work in creating and editing your own projects. So we might have to
Yes.
talk about that a little bit later on. But
Happy to help in any way.
thank you. Thank you. Now, how do you see the podcast growing or changing in the future? What are some things you might want to do or add to it? You don't have to tell all your little secrets now because you know
No,
we
so I'm all the time looking for guests to come on the podcast. And but again, I just don't want just anybody, or rather, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I don't want to
no.
do it simply because this person is popular. And I know that if I get such and such person on the podcast, that they have a ton of followers and that type of thing. My angle is all, it's all more from a how can I help you help me and vice versa,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
type of thing. And so for me, it's just really and truly just broadening my the type of guests that I do invite on the podcast. So up to now, like I'm saying, like I've told you, it's been all authors, book authors, telling a wide range of various stories. But
Yes.
I definitely want to get some musicians in the chair. I want to get some music producers in the chair. Definitely want to get artists, athletes, just all different, just people from all walks of life
Yeah.
that that I kind of find like their stories are super interesting, and hopefully um a listener will be intrigued enough to want to tune in and hear this person's story. So
Well,
that's
there you have it.
that's what's next without telling all the secrets.
That's right. You know, we have to keep a little something for ourselves. We just pop out on them when it's
That is
time
very true.
for the
Yep,
next thing. They
I
always
agree.
need a little bit of a surprise. So
I
there
agree.
you have it, people. This is what Daryl Clark is all about with his program, Reflective Resonance, on his podcast. So, Daryl, tell them how can they reach out to you if they'd like to be a guest or consider to be a guest on your show.
So the easiest way is to shoot an email, and that email address is info at Soulcraft Studios, SOULCRAFT Studios.com. That's the easiest way to put in an inquiry. I also have a Facebook page, the Reflective Resonance Podcast, also on Instagram under the same name. And then, of course, to actually watch or listen to the podcast, it's available on YouTube and also all podcast streaming platforms. So, always looking for, again, guests, of course. And if you're not interested in being a guest, if you just want to, continue being a fan of the Reflective Resonance podcast, continue to, watch. I always say it: watch, save, and share. Um, and that's, a great way to, spread our message, but then and then also in turn reach out to me, for any inquiries.
Well, there you have it. You might be the guest he's looking for, or you might know somebody he's looking for. Share that information because we want to know what these podcasters are doing. We want to get them guests in there on their shows because they have information for you, and me too. So we
Sure.
thank you so much, Daryl, for being on the program. And hey, here's a tidbit, y'all. This guy's my producer. He's one of my music producers, Daryl Clark. He is phenomenal. What? What? Throw it in there somewhere. Please check out his music too. He also has jazz projects out there as well. And I'm sure they can look you up on probably all digital stores
That is
uh,
true.
out there under Daryl Clark. He has some jazz projects as well. So support y'all. Support, support, support. Podcasting, music producing. He's the man. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode of Podcast. If I can get it out. Podcast. That's a tongue twister. You try it. Try it like 3 times in a row and let me know if you can do it. Videotape it and send it to me. You can reach me on any of the social media platforms under Stephanie D. Sanders. Send me a message. Let's connect, and I'll have you maybe as a guest here on Podcast. Thank you.